Here. Love you. We are live. Thank
Yes,
you
we
guys
are.
so much. Yeah. Thank you guys so much for being here. Welcome back to Conversation Change Agents and the Leadership Power Hour. Thank you so much for joining us once again. This is our second time going live, and we're very excited to be here with you. And Isabella and I have been speaking about this all week and creating this next episode right now, this next live stream with you. And we have two very, very important human beings joining us tonight. Each one of them has joined us from a different time zone. So each one of them has woken up either to be a part of this conversation or has stayed awake to be a part of this conversation. So I just want to thank right now to Nora and Matthew for both of you for being here with us.
Thank you.
Great to have you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Amanda. It's a pleasure to be here. Really looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, it's wonderful to be here. Thanks for having me, Amanda and Isabella.
It's our pleasure, and we cannot wait to hear your perspectives.
So I wanted to just open up the conversation to there were a couple of things that were brought up last week with Isabella and I when people were chiming in and they were speaking. A lot of people were speaking about bullying was one of the biggest topics that I saw come up, and also loneliness was also a very big topic as well. And part of the reason why Isabella and I came together to co-create this was because of the hall around the holidays. Even though we deal with mental health challenges and things throughout the year, around the holidays things can become exceptionally difficult for a lot of people. And so we wanted to focus on this time of the year to really get the conversations going, to open up this platform for anybody to share their stories, so that we're sitting around like a round table having a conversation about it, while also looking at how to create new narratives in mental health, specifically in media. Isabella and I are media experts. We've been working in media for a long time, and we're very present to the current narratives around mental health and media. And part of what we're committed to is transforming those narratives. So it would be wonderful to hear from each of you, Matthew and Nora, whichever one of you want to share what your experiences have been with your own mental health journeys. And then perhaps we can speak about after how you think that we might be able to transform what's currently happening in media and all over the world when it comes to dealing with mental health.
Absolutely. Do you want to go first, Nora?
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. All right. So my own experience with mental health is growing up as a child, I faced bullying. And even though people couldn't see the scars inside, they were real. They were as real as a physical wound, as real as a broken leg. So these scars were internal, So I still have very big eyeballs. You can see my eyeballs are kind of sunken and big. So growing up in school, I had a lot of people calling me names. There was this name calling. Some of them were just having fun, but that hurt nonetheless. So I had people calling me names like frog eyes, toad eyes, rolling eyes. While they had their fun, it was funny. It wasn't funny to me because over time that affected my self-esteem. It affected my view of myself, my relationship with others. So at some point, I just locked up and would rather want to be alone, because even when I'm having a conversation with someone, I feel they are, focused on my physical feature, my eye, So that made me kind of antisocial. I loved being alone, but eventually I realized that it was hurting me, because while I had so much bottled up inside, I really couldn't explain how these things were affecting me without being castigated, without someone trying to um, underestimate or talk down on what I was feeling. So I just kind of locked up, and eventually I found out that I was like kind of trying to implode until I got help, and eventually my husband helped me walk. So that was a phase in my mental health journey. And yeah, I would like to say that mental health is as important as just any other kind of health. And that the fact that we can't see the wounds, physical wounds and everything, doesn't mean that it hurts less, any less than those physical wounds. Yeah.
Great.
No, I really appreciate you sharing that, Nora, because a lot of that resonated with my formative experience as well. Like I was bullied quite badly when I was growing up, and those scars do take a long time to heal. And if somebody says something like that kind of hits quite deep and creates a wound, you can almost hear those words in people in the future, even when they're not saying them. You kind of anticipate that they're thinking the same thing, or that they're judging you in a similar way to how the bullies judged you in the past. And I know that I struggled for a very long time with the trauma associated with bullying. And the thing that I've come to learn about trauma is that it's very specific to the individual. What is traumatic to one person won't be traumatic to another person, and vice versa. So, given that context, I had to battle quite hard to overcome some of the bullying that I experienced, and sometimes even now, I can feel myself reacting to things in a way that suggests that I can still remember the things that happened to me. In business, for example, if somebody behaves a certain way to me, and I kind of see it as a trespass on me or my boundaries because of those previous scars, I can feel myself kind of wanting to kind of lash out or to be overly defensive, and I have to constantly keep that in check. So I don't think it's something that ever really goes away, or that you ever completely heal from. It's something that you learn to manage and learn to mitigate. So yeah, I really do appreciate what you said there, Nora, and thank you for sharing that, because it did really resonate with me.
Wow. Powerful share and powerful opening, Amanda, with starting of this conversation. And I was listening to both of you. I have to say, I reflected also how bullying is very close to harassment. And for someone who is being harassed as a child or as a teenager from older men, specifically growing up in macho culture in Europe, it's very different. And we also has to do with a lot of with cultural stuff, right? And upbringing, but also everything that starts from bullying, how that affects, as you pointed out, not only confidence, but also self-esteem, on all other aspects. Are we quick in learning? Can we adapt? Are we smart enough? Can we go to college? Can we do this? And I see a pattern, and specifically how that differently affects people that don't have so much internal family support, not necessarily, or time for that support. And then also when you don't have that in education, then kind of perpetuates in adult life. And I just want to quickly reflect, we're having a lot of great comments from our audience that is saying hello, that is also sharing some of their issues, and they're also probing some really powerful questions.
Absolutely. I just noticed actually one of the participants mentioned about OCD. A couple of people have mentioned that now, and that's something that I've had to suffer with and battle for quite a long time. I had a mental and nervous breakdown in 2012, and that kind of really sparked my OCD, having kind of suffered with it a little bit before that. And ultimately, my OCD culminated in agoraphobia, where I couldn't leave the house for 4 months because of it, and I was terrified to actually just make it outside. And that's when I really discovered the power of incremental change, because if ever there was a time when I had to take it in graduated steps to get better, then that was the time. So, you know, for me, back in 2012, when I was in my early 20s, the first step was being able to get to the garden. Then the next step was being able to get to the street. And then after that, it was to get a little bit further and a little bit further. And then, you know, here I am today. So that power of incremental change and mindset to overcome these difficulties, I think, is so important.
It's beautiful. That's so beautiful. I just wanted to acknowledge some of these comments that are being made by the people who have joined us. Do you guys mind if I just jump in and do that?
Mm-hmm.
There's people here who are greetings from Ireland. There's people here from Egypt. There are people. Hi, Pauline. Pauline is for positive masculinity. Pauline is a woman, a doctor who is committed to uniting men and women and no more of the division. Matthew Kilkenny is here from Ireland. We've got Patsy is here from Malaysia. She's saying hello. We are looking at, Mohammed from Egypt. Thank you so much for being here, Mohammed. Brett is here. Thank you so much, Brett. So we've got one person here saying, I myself have had OCD for quite some time, but my best to deal with it day to day. Some days are better than others. Yes, I recognize that OCD is definitely something that I have struggled with myself, and some days are absolutely better than others. Michael Gonzalez, you're asking what mental health issues are we speaking about? You're saying that you have bipolar disorder and take medication to stabilize your excessive tendencies, coping, overcoming post-traumas, what? Well, what we're doing is we're speaking about mental health in general. So we're not actually focusing in on one specific type of mental health illness or challenge that everyone's dealing with. We're focusing on mental health in general and how it occurs to us that it's not especially safe for us to discuss these things on open platforms because of stigmas and biases that people have towards those of us that have struggled with mental health throughout our lifetimes. And so what we're committed to, first of all, transforming that, creating safe spaces for people to speak. We are committed to having mental health professionals come on and also speak to us about ways that we can all work together, the professionals in addition to the people who have struggled with mental health, how we can all work together to shift the system so that everyone is being served in the way they need to be served and being able to access effective health services when they need to. I see that Pandora Wombat, I know, thank you for being here. She says she has both OCD and bipolar disorder, but bullying sure did not help her when she was growing up. And if it weren't for pharmaceuticals, she wouldn't be a functioning adult at all. I just want to say that Matthew Kilkenny said that over 30 years ago in his missionary college in Ireland, some of the nuns who had come back from home from a sabbatical said that bullying was going to be a major issue in society. Has it gotten worse?
Absolutely, Matthew. We'll touch that in a second. Mm-hmm. Well, fortunately, it did.
Absolutely, no, I completely agree with that. Like, bullying is like such an evil in our world, and you know, I used to think, you know, what's the best way to tackle bullying, and I thought about it a lot, and I thought, you know, is it a case of raising awareness? Is it a case of trying to stop the bullying? And obviously in a workplace setting, you would hope that employers would do what they can to actually stop the initial act. But then what I also realized was there's always going to be bullies, and you know, once we start to see it as a two-way interaction, I found that really powerful for me. So once I started to realize that there's the bully, but then there's also my autonomy in terms of how I react to that, and there's my autonomy in terms of my internal foundation that I build to shield myself from those kind of comments and that behavior. Once I started seeing myself as powerful within a situation that previously felt powerless, I really started to change the narrative in my head about bullying and realize that it's not something that happens to us. It's something that we almost choose to partake in as a dance, because it kind of, there's the bully and then there's our emotional reaction to it. And I realized that I can't control the former. I can only control the latter and my internal reaction. And I think once you realize that and you're able to master that skill, then I think it's really empowering.
Yeah.
I
I've
wanted
also,
oh, sorry. Yeah, Nora, I was actually just about to ask you. Please go ahead.
yeah, I actually agree with what Matthew said, because at some point, a bully can have only as much power as you give him. That's
Yeah.
not to underplay the hurt that comes from bullying, but sometimes so we can choose to, I like to use the term, take back your power. We can choose to take back our power by choosing to react in a certain way to bullying, trying to, which is what happened to me. you know Eventually I was helped to look at things differently. And then my husband let me know that, look, everyone is beautiful just the way they are. That you have a physical feature just makes you different, and you are unique. So just see yourself that way, and don't allow yourself to be browbeaten. Don't allow yourself to be put in that very dark hole. And so that helped me eventually um, work on my confidence and self-esteem issues. So sometimes, yeah, bullying has a lot to do with how we are able to respond, how we are able to be helped, because sometimes we also need help to respond in a certain way to bullying.
And what I want to just to quickly touch on that other Matthew was sharing about, it is the bullying get worse. And Matthew, you spot on. We've seen much more increase, not anymore with teenagers and younger children in younger generation, and specifically cyberbullying, but we've fortunately seen a rapid increase in adults, and what that also means in working environment. And one thing I want to share for everyone that shared their diagnosis and being so open and vulnerable, thank you for doing that, because a lot of organizations, including healthcare providers, their employees don't always feel obviously comfortable and able to share that they are having issue or they're having specific diagnosis, because they're afraid how that's going to be perceived. And a lot of times, what I'm finding why so many organizations have such a high emergency response and absence of their talent, based on my consultative work, that because they don't have no provision for employee to bring medication to work in a safe way or container and take them privately or confidentially in a way that is not considered they're hiding something or taking a drugs, because the way things are being perceived. They can't have them in their purse or around their desk, or if they go in bathroom, somebody else will see it. And that creates so much quickly rumors and conversations that actually can be absolutely negatively affecting not only that particular individual, but everyone else involved. So this is also opportunity why I wanted to address specifically on LinkedIn for a lot of employers that are working and crafting and improving their wellness program and well-being on their talent. That one of the first things is also to look at, what are you doing to making sure that talent that is depending on taking regularly medication feels safe that they can do that, either is mental health or other types of medication, and that they have a safe environment to do so without being judged. And then also, of course, awareness. How can we support each other's in a way, neutral way, that shows that kindness, compassion, and not first reaction and over dramatization and polarization that we're seeing? I think we have a great opportunity for that. Passing back to you, Amanda.
No, I absolutely agree with you. And that's interesting that you bring up about in the workplace environment, because if we're looking at the people who are generally managing that part of the work environment isn't that HR. And so how are we training and developing HR professionals? How are we doing that? So perhaps there's something that's missing, because when it comes to managing a workforce and to empowering the workforce to step into their leadership roles, into their own greatness, what is missing insofar that anyone who's dealing with a mental health, maybe a crisis or issue, what is happening in that exchange between that HR professional and that employee that robs that employee of their dignity? So there's something very important to look at in that exchange, in that space. And so what perhaps is missing in the training and development of HR professionals, or HR, the head of HR in huge corporations, insofar that anyone who's dealing with any type of health issue, whether it be cancer or mental health, how do we ensure that we're responding to the situation from a place of dignity, compassion first and foremost, and also to ensure that that person experiences dignity in who they are, and not that they're being judged, or not that it's an unsafe space. So how do we work as a team inside companies to ensure that that dynamic is occurring?
And I just want to quickly add this before we pass back to Nora and Matthew, and then Amanda, please take a look in the comments as well. What happens is that we're often looking cost. Sadly, one of the cases I've been involved, they start seeing that their employees and healthcare provider, actually, they're seeing employees had a dramatic increase expenditure and cost under insurance policy, healthcare insurance policy. And what turns out that was the biggest response, because they were ending up in a hospital in ER. Yeah. What tends to get to the point someone goes in ER? Because they're relapsing of taking consistently medication. And we know what that means. When you need to be on medication, you cannot be. And why I turn as an advocate, luckily, I mean, being blessed that I never had any major mental health issues, any problems, but I'm seeing way too many of friends and colleagues that suffer. And some unfortunately committed suicide because they could not felt the being supported, accepted, understood, and was so heartbreaking to see how this little dialogue that Amanda just proposed could shift of awareness and education and compromise. And it's unfortunate that sometimes has to be red flag, increased expenditure on the insurance policy, and it's ER, and why the people are going so much to emergency room when actually root cause was around exactly what we're talking about. Mm-hmm. So when we create opportunities and space, then we were not going to have escalation. We'll not have a crisis. We'll not have all the other domino effect that affects not only colleagues and employees and teams, but also families at hand, right? And children.
Absolutely. And just before Nora and Matthew, before we go back to both of you, I just want to acknowledge a couple of more comments here. We've got Chad Harris here, who is actually the husband of someone that I've known since I was 11 years old. Chad has struggled with chronic major depressive disorder and PTSD. And I know that Chad is doing everything he can right now to manage what he's dealing with. And it's been quite the journey. Chad's wife also knows what I experienced as a young child being bullied in elementary school, and then again in grade 9 when I was living in Ontario. But I also want to acknowledge someone is here, Oliver from Paris. Thank you so much for being here. I also want to acknowledge that Patsy is saying, thank you, Matthew, to opening up this space for OCD awareness. She's proud of you to be your authentic self, to share your journey of healing. Brett Packard, support, intervention, and repairing damage. Lend a hand to your fellow neighbor. Start by asking and listening. Ask how they are, offer help, offer an ear. Just knowing that someone is there can make a difference. Cheryl Dean says mental health crisis is at an all-time high, especially with what COVID has done. But the messages that are being sent, the online drama, and the overall sense of there's no hope is prevalent, especially with the young teens and the suicide rates that are going on with the young generation around their 20s and 30s. They've lost their way. We need support for them, and they need our support more than ever right now. Patsy says gender bullying is building resentment in relationships. That's 100% yes.
Yes.
Love, definitely. The love language needs to be amplified. Absolutely, 1,000%. Dr. Pauline says, can we forgive the unforgivable acts of the past? Yes. I am so fortunate not to experience deep trauma. However, I've had issues wondering who I was as a teenager with a very masculine minded nature and not girly. I was always feeling awkward and not female enough. I was told I was not soft enough, and it took me a long time, decades, to be me. We need to get kids in school sharing without judgment, especially from teachers. Her school was teacher, but was run by nuns. So Cheryl's got a bunch. I just want to move now on to Nora and Matthew before we read more comments. But I did want to acknowledge some of those comments right now. But please, Nora and Matthew, please, the floor is yours.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. So for the workplace, making a safe space, like Isabella mentioned, it should not be something that employees hide, the state of their mental health because they feel they'll be judged and stigmatized. It should actually be like your regular health. So what companies can do is actually promote mental health issues, like in their newsletters, in their emails, not waiting until someone actually has a meltdown or something. So promote these, talk about it frequently, and assure your employees that it's a safe space, and actually they can have, they can feel safe to take care of their mental health without being stigmatized. So I think communication in the workplace is key to helping employees feel safe to talk about their mental health.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, Nora. And I think the other thing that we need to bear in mind is that the workplace, I think for a very long time, if not forever, has measured productivity in a totally counterproductive way. And I know it's a little bit different because I run my business remotely, but the people in my team, I kind of do things based on KPIs and things that I have in terms of expectations across, say, a month period. And within that time, I'm not kind of monitoring exactly like the hours that people are working. Like they could be on a beach for all I care. Like as long as they, within a certain period of time, meet the KPIs of the business, then actually there's quite a lot of flexibility within that. So people can take the breaks that they need. They can do whatever they need to do for their mental health. And obviously, a workplace office environment might have a different feel. But I think because so much of leadership now is about kind of breathing down people's neck, and we have businesses that monitor keyboard strokes and computer usage and things like that, that actually it means that if you're suffering from something, you have to go and actively seek approval to do what you need to do for your mental health. So you have to actively ask whether you can take that extra 5-minute break. You have to ask whether you can go and take your medication in private. If you create a workplace where actually you can step off a little bit and allow people to have that autonomy, these things don't seem quite so magnified because you're not constantly having to ask permission to make these minor adjustments. So I think changing how we view productive potential and how we monitor people's performance will also tie in very well with mental health and making sure that people don't feel like they have to constantly account for themselves and the adjustments that they're making for themselves. The other point that I wanted to mention is one that Patsy and a few others have mentioned about this relationship between men and women, and I think this is so important that we start having these conversations. Obviously, Amanda and I, we've spoken about this privately as well in terms of fostering this better understanding between men and women, and ceasing to see ourselves in silos and speaking in groups and speaking in echo chambers, and also creating divides for the sake of it. So I think the more that we can have these conversations across gender lines, I think that's going to be really important. And I was struck by what Nora said about the support that you had from your husband. And it kind of shows how, if somebody isn't in that situation and they're perhaps in a lonelier situation, how it can really compound things that might be going on in the workplace or with their mental health. So all these things really tie in together: the workplace, the bullying, the loneliness. I think if we can view this as a very multifaceted entity, then we'll start to get to the crux of the issue.
Excellent share from both of you, Nora and Matthew. And for Amanda, obviously, she was mentioning earlier how much that affected her early stages. But I'm curious also, how did you overcame as an adult that, Amanda? Obviously, you are very successful. You're using your voice and platform for positivity. And now you, Nora and Matthew, are doing the same. So if you can answer that for our audience, because all the comments, they love that we have this dialogue, but we also want to give them a little bit of hope that they have this amazing strength and resilience, right? And then some really good points how they can tap into that with themselves and turn things around.
Yeah, I noticed that there were a couple people that have joined us on Instagram, some people that I went to high school with. And there's been a couple of people here on LinkedIn that have joined that knew me in elementary school. And so interestingly, I how do you turn that around? There's a great quote that Derek Mildred brought up to me. It was Derek Mildred or Brett Packard. I'm sorry, you guys. One of you guys brought it up to me. I think it was Derek Mildred. And it was very profound. It was something that Jamie Lee Curtis said, the actress, who I love. Jamie Lee Curtis. She's been in a ton of wonderful movies. She said, and I quote, "Hurt people hurt people." And to me, that really landed deeply, because I thought that really is the truth. So, and right now I happen to be watching a show called Cobra Kai. Now, Cobra Kai is a show based on the 80s movie called The Karate Kid. And when we think about a show like Cobra Kai, we think it's all about karate. But really, that show is actually about mental health. We look at what happened in the 1984 movie when Daniel LaRusso beat Johnny in the final match. And Johnny had been this real bully. He was the blonde in The Karate Kid. He'd been this real bully to this new kid at school called Daniel. Daniel had just moved to California from New Jersey. And in that movie in the 1980s, it's like Johnny was the person that everybody hated because he was the bully. He bullied Daniel. He had all the friends. And so he was the guy that we all looked at as the audience saying he's the bad guy. This show takes place, 25, 30 years later. We're now seeing why Johnny was the way that he was. And it's giving us a lot of insight as to why Johnny turned into the bully that he did. And so when I heard that quote by Jamie Lee Curtis, that it was that hurt people, in that moment, I got present to that when I was 11 and 12 years old, when this bullying had happened to me, when it first started, I wasn't mature enough to have the amount of compassion I needed to have for the person that was bullying me. I automatically just felt like the victim, and I felt very sad and hurt because I couldn't understand what I had done to be treated that way. I didn't understand I couldn't figure it out. And I wanted someone to tell me what was wrong with me, what I had done, and what I could fix about myself in order to fit into that group of girls in my elementary school. But I never got an answer. When I went to high school, I had a much better year. I became friends with everyone, and it seemed like everyone loved me too, for the most part. And so I was able to experience the exact opposite feeling, which was really special. But then the very next year, once I moved schools again, the same thing happened again. The girls didn't like me for some reason. And so it was this pattern that kept happening throughout my lifetime. And even up until grade 11 and 12, where I had many, many friends, but then all of a sudden, a bunch of them turned on me and weren't my friends anymore. And those were very traumatic experiences for me. So traumatic, in fact, that there are things that I've come into my adult life remembering remembering, forgiving always and letting go of that trauma, but remembering the impact it had on me and wanting so badly to protect young girls and boys from ever having to go through any of that I went through. And so for me, it's about these echo chambers that Matthew was bringing up, in that I find that a lot of the younger generation, my brother, for instance, he's 21 years old, you know, a lot of the younger guys and girls are going into these silos, these echo chambers, and they're listening to certain opinions. And and they're going there for validity and to feel comfortable, to validate how they personally feel about how they're perceiving the world. But the issue with those things is that everything that is outside of those tunnel vision of opinions is, they're considered wrong and are demonized. So how do we bridge this gap where it's like we create these new narratives where it's inclusive, first of all, where people's feelings are valid and they matter, where we don't immediately dismiss someone because they say to us, you know, I went through these hard things when I was a kid, and maybe they're acting like a victim in the moment, and maybe that's how we're judging them. But the point is that that's their truth. And so they're dealing with something that is traumatic for them, that they may not have dealt with effectively yet. So how can we be a support to someone who's dealing with stuff, who's not gotten complete or has closure with what they've dealt with in the past, while also encouraging them to get the professional help that they need, but letting them know that they're not alone in the process? It's an inquiry that I'm in myself, because I don't know the answers. I'm looking for those.
And I might have some, but let's hear from Matthew and Nora next, and then we'll circle back. Great share, Amanda.
Yeah, I think what you said there, Amanda, was really interesting. And for me, it comes down to this paradox that's opened up around social media. And you would think that, you know, nominally, because we're more connected than ever, you would think that A, loneliness would have decreased, and B, because we speak to each other more often, that we would have become more understanding of other people and their views and their background. But actually, the huge paradox of social media is that it's made people more lonely and also more entrenched in their positions. So I think, you know, if we can get back, and this comes to the point that was mentioned about people in their 20s and 30s, that so much of their communication now is purely on social media. And you know, I've spoken to people in workplace settings before that are in their, you know, teenage years, and you can tell that they really struggle to hold an in-person conversation now. So I think the more that we can take these conversations offline into our friendship groups, into our families, I think that connection that we hoped would come from social media will actually come in a more grounded and more pertinent sense, and will actually start to alleviate some of the problems of loneliness and those silos and those divisions that you were referring to, Amanda.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with Matthew that we need to form relationships also offline, as this will also give people an opportunity to heal and get better. For me, that worked because, like I said, I was antisocial, but at some point I got help and really went out there to make friends, you know. So what I would do is when I see a shy person or a shy kid, I try to make that person my friend, because I knew where I was coming from, and I knew how your past could affect your confidence and your self-esteem. So that for me was a way I could help. I actually reached out and made friends and tried to be very helpful. So that kind of took my mind away from my own issues and from my own insecurities. So I think one of the ways we can actually help better our own mental health is actually being there for people, actually being very helpful, developing real friendships, or online and offline, and generally giving people a safe space, to speak, and we just listen here.
Love that. Just wanted to, I was reading the comments, also respond with what all of you said. And just to share a little bit glimpse where I'm coming from. I had a privilege and opportunity to work with people from over 120 countries worldwide, very intimately, closely. People that actually are being affected with worst possible human atrocities you can imagine on planet Earth inflicted by another human being. War, genocide, torture, human trafficking, child labor, rape, and list goes on. And when I looked from my time that I worked with those individuals in Sweden and then in United States for over a decade, just in United States alone, I realized how many people actually were always positive, friendly, kind. Of course, they had a lot of issues, but they were finding and figuring ways and tapping into their resilience to feel better. And when often who is attacked, we also have to understand who bully is usually attacked, right? That's also their cry for help most of the time, but it's also fear, pure fear factor that it's coming from because it's harder to control something, right? And then where that is going. One thing what I learned, what was really very helpful, so a lot of people ask, how can you forgive yourself? At that time, you did the best you could. Whatever happened in the past, every single individual, just assume that you did the best you could with knowledge you had and capacity internally you had, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, to process what was going on. So when we stop blaming, first of all, ourselves, and then start blaming others, then we start really tapping into power and wisdom. And that's where the healing and exchange can happen. And why I'm also bringing, I've been speaking on this for decades also in the past, specifically because I am genocide, torture, war, trauma survivor. And a lot of people ask me, how, Isabella, in the world you can possibly forgive? And I'm like, I had to. I'm seeing what it's doing for people generationally that are holding on the hate and holding on revenge and negative thoughts and holds them and robs them hostage forever. They can never progress, their affects their health, and because they never allowed to process that and let it go. And then also learn from it, right? When we learn, when we know more, when we know better, we do better. And that also gives us opportunity to turn things around, right? So what I'm trying to say is, with everyone is in different place. And what really helped me tremendously to be effective with what I was doing, meeting people where they are. So if Matthew has a different spectrum of issues, meeting him openly where he's at and not judge and normalize that. Where's Nora? Where's Amanda? Where am I? And then when we have this beautiful mutual understanding, when we don't focus on those negative things or things that separate, but we focus on things that bring us together, that is where the magic happens. So for all of you that specifically that you mentioned and you're struggling for letting it go, it's important to reflect on the lessons, but it's also important to tap into wisdom and say, I'd never refer to myself, I'm refugee. I am former refugee. I was refugee. I'm former survivor of genocide, torture, and war trauma. I am not today that person. Otherwise, I'll be constantly in the surviving mode. So quicker we can let go, or we can say, I used to be manic, or I used to have this, or I used to act this way, but I am actually in control of my mental health. I am healthy. I am working together with healthcare providers to create that safety space for me to function beautifully as adult, but also to function for others. So I will pause here and get back to Amanda, because it seems like we're having a lot of comments. And I also want to hear your reaction, guys, Matthew, Nora, and Amanda.
Yeah, I think that's really important, the points that you brought up. Definitely. I am a rape survivor and also domestic violence survivor. And I think that I'm also a chronic illness survivor. I'm currently living with with a plethora of things. But every day that I wake up, it's I'm really grateful to be alive. And if I focus on the things that are going badly, or the way I feel physically a lot of the time and mentally a lot of the time, um, I it becomes worse for me. And so something for me personally is that I don't look at uh, I don't often go into those types of things. I know that Isabella, you've written about those things and you talk about those things, and I suppose that that could be something I could talk about. I could speak about being a rape survivor. I could speak about being a domestic violence survivor. I could speak about being a chronic illness survivor and still dealing with that every day. But for me, in order for me to heal on mentally and psychologically, I need to not focus on those things. So I've done my healing in those ways where I no longer see myself as a victim of those situations, of those circumstances. And that's how I'm able to become what Jocelyn Herman Saccio says, unmessable with.
Mm.
We are able to become unmessable with when we don't allow our past to dictate what's going on right now. And don't get me wrong, I mean, I know we're all physically dragging along all this baggage with us from our past, and that's just human nature. But how can we let go of that baggage so that we can live in the here and the now and in the moment, and take the wisdom we gain from what we learned from the past based experiences, but not bring that into every situation now? Because if we do that, we're never going to have healthy relationships. We're never going to be able to bridge the gender divide, which we've just been speaking about. We're never going to be able to step into. We're always going to step into things with an immense amount of fear because it's based on our past-based experiences. So it's like creating a fresh slate,
Yes.
fresh foundation, even though we come from a place of these experiences and we're speaking about them right now, and we're having this beautiful, incredible, regenerative conversation together. And how do we just start new, and create something brand new right now, which is new narratives instead of like something different than that. Yeah.
And just quickly to jump in, Amanda, I love what you said. We let go when we're ready. That's how simple as that is. And everybody has that power. And whenever someone is ready and others can help them in that process, that's a good way. And I love what you also said. Not everybody will want to talk about their trauma. Some people through conversations heal. Some people actually heal in a different ways and privately. But I remembered the reasons why I spoke personally, not necessarily about my story, but actually of experiences that I saw, and so that others can understand who is the makeup and DNA of our new communities. Who are these people today that are around us, and how we have to change our perception, how we portray and perceive that. And only way you can do it, and I remember I did an exhibit with beautiful photos of survivors and showing their smiles and capturing amazing expression on their faces, and people that really did not look anything different than Nora, Matthew, yourself. And was so beautiful that then starts normalizing, because we went to such a complete opposites. And we have a chance now to find each other in the middle, but it's not one right answer either. So I just love that it's so many different avenues, but more we speak about, and we can learn what worked very well for Matthew. We can learn well what worked for Nora, what worked well for Brad and others. And that is the power of shared learning. And as you said, opportunity to create new narrative and not refer yourself. That's why I mentioned I'm not referring to myself as a refugee anymore for a long period of time. That is not my story. That circumstance that brought me here, but that is past. I overcame that. And I think that we have chance to change the language and change the narrative. What are your thoughts, Matthew?
No, I think that's very powerful. And for me, the way that I've overcome those things in the past that have been traumatic is to constantly bring myself back to what my overarching aim is in life. And one of my favorite quotes is from Friedrich Nietzsche, who's a philosopher, and he says, "He who has a why can bear almost anyhow. And
Mm.
that's kind of the mentality that I try to use on days that are really difficult. Those days when it's hard to, to get out of bed even or to function, is to bear in mind your ultimate why, because it will sustain the how. And on a deep metaphysical level, we know now that humans know objects and analyze objects by their usage.
Mm.
So automatically we filter information into three categories: irrelevant, useful, or hindrance. The way that we know something is, for example, a couch, is not by looking at it or kind of things like it's a right angle, things like that, because that could explain anything. We know that it's that object because of the use that we have for it. And our body automatically starts to map onto objects like utensils, a settee, a chair, by virtue of its usage. Like our body already starts to morph itself internally relative to the object before we actually get there, because we know its usage. So if we start to see everything that we come across in life in terms of, is this useful for my aim? And if it's not, then it might be irrelevant, or if it's a hindrance, then you might need to tackle it. But if you have an aim, then it means that you can see every object, every person, everything that you come across within that context. So you can start to filter information and events that happen in your own life. So, if somebody tries to bully me, or if somebody leaves a negative comment on social media, if you're very clear what your aim is that day, you can decide what action is going to be useful and what action is going to be a hindrance to that aim. And I think if you start to see things in those terms, that can allow you to let go of baggage, because you can actually see it as very counter to the aim that you're going full steam ahead to achieve.
I think that's amazing. That is some really excellent guidance and advice there, Matthew. And Nora, Nora, you and I spoke the other day, and you shared something with me, which was it saddened me really deeply about what was going on just down the street from you. I think you had said that something had happened with a woman, but I really, really wanted to hear from you. How are you guys, in all of our communities, we're all dealing with mental health things, I think, in different ways, right? And
Yeah.
so, and we're all coming from different communities. So it's like, what are we like? How is it occurring in your community? Like, how do you see it occurring, and what do you think we can do?
Okay, so the issue with the woman. In fact, I had another issue today, and I just met a lady, got talking, and then she broke down and was crying. Tried to pacify her, and then I realized that she had a broken relationship, and this woman was talking suicide and was saying she wants to kill herself because she feels hurt, she feels taken advantage of, and everything. So eventually, we were able to get her the help she needed just today. Before leaving her, we ensured that she was in a safe space, safe hands, and then eventually we left. So this is something that happens like on a daily, and people just talk down on these people like, I'll say it in Nigerian pidgin English. You want to kill yourself because of a man? You won't kill yourself because of man? People just talk down on this, not realizing that people react in different ways to
Yeah.
things. So for me, what helped me eventually walk towards recovery was something Isabella mentioned, something about forgiveness. I when people bullied me, even as an adult, even as a married woman, when people refer to my physical features, I learned to forgive. And then what I just realized is that holding on to hurts and emotion is like not giving yourself peace. So you forgive people because you deserve your own peace. You want to be at peace with yourself. So that helped me to, okay, this person really doesn't know any better, may not have set out to hurt me. And so I forgive this person. So that helped me move on quickly. and actually look out for people. I deliberately look out for vulnerable people and see how I can help them. So right here in Nigeria, mental health is still a thing because the narratives around it is still people castigate people who take certain drastic actions, and so people don't feel safe to talk. But thankfully, some individuals are changing this. Some organizations are working hard to let people know that, look, um, mental health is a thing, because you may not be crazy and roaming the streets, but that doesn't mean you don't have a mental health issue. So feel free, um, talk to us. The organizations like that, and I applaud what they are doing, because I can't tell you how many suicides have been averted, how many people have had a safe space to heal and then generally go on. So it's still a thing here. We are still trying to change the narrative here in Nigeria, but I think we are making some progress.
Nora, I think that you need to be leading the way in that.
It's something I'm actually passionate about.
Yeah, no
Knowing
pressure. Just saying, no pressure. Just saying.
Mhm. Actually, looking out for vulnerable people and actually helping them, for me, I found it as a powerful way to heal, a powerful way to find to take my power back and really be happy. And so that life of service is a no-brainer for me. If I want to be happy, then I actually have to go out there and try to make people, feel better. Thank you.
Wonderful.
That's
Wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you. I understand exactly how you feel. Yeah, thank you.
And we're seeing also a lot of great comments here and a validation that slowly progress and change happens. And when we're acknowledged, when we don't play complacent, and sometimes that ripple effect. So hopefully for everybody watching and listening this evening can also start thinking what they can do, what you can do to create that positive ripple effect, like Nora is doing in Nigeria, in very different culture where a lot of things are different from other parts of the world, or lifestyle in US, for example, and women like her very strongly, powerfully carving the pathway for herself, and also ways to live her life on daily basis. But often what I'm finding, if we offer helping hand by just listening to other person or giving that space for them to ask, or at least share what they feel or what they need or what they want, I think that could really be also a great opportunity to direct someone based on that if we're not able to help. So it's not necessarily always taking everything on yourself, but is also giving opportunities for others to learn about resources and what's available, right? Right, Amanda?
Absolutely. And I just want to say one thing that I think was so beautiful. Dr. Pauline Crawford said, having our shared values, our shared narratives with understanding different positive perspectives. So when we're rooting ourselves in universal values, compassion, dignity, love, equity, full self-expression, when we're rooting ourselves in these shared values and these shared narratives, but with the understanding of different positive perspectives, then we can all work together to create these new narratives and these new conversations in this area, and really in any topic, but specifically in mental health. So that's what we're doing. Yeah.
Yes.
It's beautiful. Noor, I see you. Noor, thank you so much for being here. Noor says that Nora, it happens every day. I'm not sure if Noor is in Nigeria. Maybe it is. Maybe she is. Noor is saying you have to forgive to feel better. Exactly what we've all been speaking about is forgiving and letting go of that. And Nora's saying that she's so happy to see that they're slowly changing the narrative down there. So I'm not sure if Nora's calling in, if she's here from Nigeria as well or not. I'm not sure, but I just wanted to acknowledge these. There's also more. Oh, Nora's in Toronto, Ontario. Okay. if you want to, Isabella, Dr. Pauline Crawford is saying something right here. If you wanted to, do you want to acknowledge that?
She was mentioning about hosting the wisdom circles with Trio Luz, no judgment, anger, or coercion, and that is very often asked what happens with someone in the circle and turns angry and over when they're over opinionated. But yes, but creating safe space and having the rules are essential. So it's okay also to say, even to loved ones and family members, but also in a working environment, if something is triggering, or it's like, please don't speak with me in voice, or please don't use those types of words. I really don't appreciate that, or this is really not the way I would like to have a direction or conversation to go. It's okay to ask for break, shift, and pause, and that makes a tremendous shifts. Great answer for Dr. Pauline Crawford and her work and how she deals with that in those situations. And I actually glad you brought up this, Dr. Pauline, because what we're seeing is a lot of reaction. And we're seeing a lot of crisis and operating from crisis mode. So it's very important not to let others people's crisis to become our crisis. I remember even when I used to run torture rehabilitation center, I will say we're not crisis center. Start thinking that way, because it's so important not to get in that mindset. And that really helps staying grounded and calm, and also easy to process what is going on and how to position yourself. Otherwise, you're just part of the response, and that gets very, very challenging very, very quickly. So very important how to be calm, how to have that safety, and how to ask for that safety, and also how to make a choice and decision to leave. Because you have the rights and you're more powerful. So take your power back and exercise those rights in a peaceful way, where you don't have to be victimized or re-victimized because of bullying or harassing or judging or someone's tantrums.
I have a question for Nora and Matthew, and you too, Isabella. There's something that that I came to realize it's called a respond and realize methodology. So do you feel that, so say something happens to us, one of us, and in that moment, we get really triggered, because that's natural. We all get triggered by things that bother us, right? But in that moment, do you feel that if we could just be present with the fact that we're being triggered, but in that same space, get really present to our heart space of just compassion, just that one thing, and have compassion in that moment for whatever's occurring in the other person's world, then when we respond, we're responding not from our trigger, but from the compassion instead. Do you think it's possible to shift that in a moment, so that we can respond and then have that realization in a different, have that conversation go in a different way? That's my question to you guys.
Absolutely, and the crucial word that you used there, Amanda, was respond rather than react. And that's the crucial difference. Most people react, they don't respond. And it's a very important skill to learn how to open up a space between a stimuli and a response. And it does take work, because we end up, just biting back at people. We react in the moment based on temporary emotions. It's like when people say, don't make long-term decisions based on temporary emotions. And, we've all been in that situation. You might get a really heated email from somebody, and you just want to fire back straight away. And, it just escalates and nothing gets achieved. So a lot of it is about having the skill and emotional intelligence to almost tell what the other person's emotion is, so that you don't then contribute to the escalation. So if you can see that somebody's bringing anger towards you, then being able to take that breath and open up that space between stimuli and response. I always say, if you get a really angry email, sit on it for 24 hours and see what your response is the next day. You're probably not going to be as bothered by that point in time, and you're going to be able to view it in a more emotionally neutral way. I think emotional neutrality is a really hard thing to achieve, but it is possible, and it kind of goes to the heart of, for example, mindfulness principles, where you can practice looking at a stimuli that would normally bother you and kind of deal with it on an emotional level. We often try to deal with problems on a rational mental level, or on the level of reacting in the external world, but most of life is lived internally. Most things that most things that bother us because it has an internal reaction. So if we can kind of fix that internal dynamic, and kind of open up that space for emotional neutrality, I think that kind of goes to the heart of the issue that you were mentioning there, Amanda.
I agree, and I'm really happy to hear you say that, because it's something that I've been contemplating with my colleagues and my business partners, and looking at when we're responding to something and being triggered by something, what can we do in that moment? And Nora, I wanted to hear from you too, what you thought about that, and how you think, if you think that that's possible in a moment, that when something's triggering us, if we can get present to compassion for the other person and whatever it is that they're bringing to that space, so we're not reacting or responding from a different place.
Mhm. Yeah, it's possible, but frankly, it's not always easy, because the natural reaction is to give fire for fire, you know. But it's possible because I remember I read somewhere, can't remember the exact quote, said something about people being in therapy because other people refuse to go for therapy. So some people are hurt, and they are just taking out their hurt on others. So if we are compassionate, we could actually get them to begin looking at things at a new level. You know, reminds me of someone who was very rude to another person in the gym where I go to. So I go to a gym like times 2 or 3 times a week. And so this person was very rude to another person, and surprisingly, that other person just was so calm and responded well. And eventually, this guy goes up to the other guy and like, "Bro, I'm sorry about what I did." You know, so that for me was very powerful. Seeing him not respond in kind was very powerful, and it kind of dawned on the other person like, I messed up. I should have done better. So it's possible. It's not always easy, but it is possible, and that helps to make the world a better place.
And to answer from my perspective, everybody heads on a different journey. More you work on your triggers, you recognize what those triggers are, and then really realize, to learn how to self regulate, how self adjust. And that really helps. And then also not to bring those triggers in conversation if they're not really relevant to situation. It's also a question, how well the other person is being known, how well they know, through partnerships or dynamics of the team and relationship, how well they know each other. Because we also have to because we assume a lot of parallels around shared understanding, and we have tons of assumptions. Those are one of the biggest killers and biggest triggers. I was just talking to FBI, one of the top world's negotiator, who also reshaped the negotiation ways how they do negotiation for FBI, and he did this in such a high level capacity just around that. And one of the key things is always being neutral, not just assuming, not being judgmental, but in the same time create a neutral space where you truly can connect with the other person. So, and I love those 4 agreements from Miguel Ruiz, where he said, don't take anything personal. Yeah. And then what's really important, if we operate by specific set of rules, and even if we're surprised and we did not expect certain things to happen, I think it's very important also to come up with a framework that effectively works very well. I use actually that framework with one couple, the interracial couple that had a struggle in 2020. And they really didn't know how to carry with issues that were going on at that time, where they were living in Minnesota with everything that was happening here in the United States around plethora of problems. and brought up so many things that they really never talked about it. So also things that we don't deal with or kind of pretend that don't exist, they're going to persist till we do. So it's very important to work on ourselves, learn to let it go, and honestly, think, well, like if it's something over, if you already accomplished that, that's fine. Call it victory, call it good, and don't go back into that framework. Because a lot of times we also bring the framework from various reasons when maybe it's not even trigger. And we have to really think about it. Why I'm bringing this up? What's still there that is maybe that I want to highlight or want to portray? So more we try to give a clean slate, start fresh, not assume, not project, and not take it personal, which is, as Nora said, hard, because you know what? We want a quick fix. Everything is speeding up, right? And the hardest and most expensive work, but most rewarding work is the work that we do on ourselves. And to be effective and to deal with people who did you harm and still face them and be able to talk to that. I've been in so many of those scenarios. Only way you can do is, again, pulling back, coming from that neutral space, and outcomes will be dramatically different. So more we can self-regulate, the better it is, and more we can work on ourselves.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Isabella. Thank you. I want to be really respectful of time here. Nora I think it's about 3 or 4 a.m. for her in the morning. Matthew is getting very late for him too. So I wanted to find out if there's anything else that either of you would like to share. I know you, we don't want to deprive you guys of sleep. I'm so sorry. And you're already being deprived of sleep, Nora. I know that.
I'll go back to sleep right away. So I thank you so much, Isabella and Amanda, for giving me this space, to talk about something I'm really passionate about. It's something that, you can count on me any day, anytime to talk about. And really listening to Matthew and you all gave me some insights, and especially the beautiful work that Isabella is doing. Yeah, it's something that I'm really proud of, and the world needs more of what you're doing. So I say thank you. Thank you for having me. It's been wonderful being here.
Thank you so much, Nora.
Pleasure.
Yeah, thank you so much, Nora. I've learned a lot from the contributions that you made, and also Isabella and Amanda, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I think if I have to leave on a final thought, it would be this, which is that, we often treat ourselves in a way that's very different to how we would treat somebody that we genuinely care about, whether it's a spouse or a family member or a child. We often treat people that we love much better than we treat ourselves. And, this is also backed up by certain evidence. For example, if you take somebody that's been prescribed something by the doctor for themselves, and they've also had a prescription from the vet for their pet, statistics show that actually they're more likely to go and pick up this prescription for their pet than they are for themselves. And actually, it kind of shows just how much we don't treat ourselves as somebody that we love.
Yeah.
So I would say that if there's a key takeaway from this that I want people to think about, is that treat yourself as you would treat somebody that you genuinely love and have compassion for. And if you do that and you have a worthwhile aim in life, then I think it will sustain a lot of the hard times along the way. But yeah, just to reiterate again, I've really enjoyed the conversation, and really appreciate everyone that gave up their time to come and listen. Obviously, please do connect with me, everybody, on LinkedIn, and let's keep the conversation going. And hopefully we can do more of this.
Wonderful. Pleasure to have you both and then hear from your perspectives as well. Deeply touched and definitely to be continued. Will be some great stuff in works, and we'll definitely share. Back to you, Amanda.
Thank you so much, Nora and Matthew, for being here. It's been a pleasure and an honor to have you both here. Thank you for agreeing, and thank you for offering your time, and thank you for staying awake and waking up to be on this live with us. It means the world to us to have your voices here. Your voices matter, and it makes a big difference for us and for our whole community. So thank you so very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all participants. Thank you for being with us, and see you next Thursday.
Sounds great. Take care, everyone. Have a wonderful evening or a wonderful day wherever you're located in the world. Take care. Sending love out to all. Thank you.